So just for a quick review, and perhaps for those who weren't here last week. So we talked about this passage as being referred to by pastors and theologians and writers as the gospel within the gospel. It is the gem of the gospel. It is the shining example of Jesus showing us who the Father actually is. And if you were to be stranded on an island and you only had one piece of scripture you could have, you would want this one, this above all other scripture, because it's Jesus telling us who the Father really is. Literary professors have called it the greatest short story ever written. And it's brilliant. It's brilliant because it has layer after layer after layer in this simple little story that Jesus tells about two sons. So last week we talked about the younger son, and we stopped halfway through the story with the younger son. This week we're going to look at the older son. But in order for this to make sense in both cases, we have to understand this preamble, this introduction here, which we often just race right over. The tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to Jesus. Now, these people were despised. And the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, "Look at this man. He receives sinners and eats with them." Now, these sinners we talked about, they were a specifically designated people in Jesus' day, okay? And the Orthodox Jews, the religious Jews, the people who faithfully went to temple or synagogue every Sunday, they would have nothing to do with these people. In fact, they had laws about, they called them the people of the land. You couldn't buy from them. You couldn't sell to them. Your kids couldn't hang out with them, let alone marry them. They were the despised people, the people of the land. And now, all of a sudden, they're hanging out with Jesus. And the religious people are put off. They're like, what kind of teacher, what kind of rabbi is this Jesus? He's hanging out and eating with these people of the land, those dirty no-gooders. So Jesus tells the story of two sons. So his response to their accusations was to tell a story about two sons. Now, last week we talked about the first one. And listen carefully. So prodigal is like a lost word in our society. What does that word prodigal actually mean? We talked about the real meaning in our translation here today. It's translated reckless. But really the root of the word is senseless. So the younger son wastes all that he got by living senselessly. And I gave you an example of how I had just rushed through the Starbucks last week on my way to church when this poor lady was all flustered and she was new, and I was thinking about my sermon and getting to church on time, and I didn't even take the time to acknowledge and love her and look in her eyes and be grace to her, because I was living senselessly, not paying attention to the moment and where I was and what God wanted to be in me, okay? So when we read about this young son going out and wasting his father's inheritance in prodigal living, what are we talking about? We're talking about he went out and lived recklessly, senselessly. And the whole point of this parable is that Jesus is trying to teach all of us something by telling a story about two sons. And the way he's doing it is that his story is meant to be a mirror. He's holding up a mirror to these people, to these Pharisees who are criticizing him for hanging out with those dirty people of the land. And why would anybody hold up a mirror for you? So you could see yourself. So, we have three characters in the story. Which one do you see in your mirror? We have a young son who senselessly wastes his father's inheritance, his half. And then we have an older son. What's the picture of the older son? Jealousy. Entitlement. Fair is fair. Hey, this isn't fair. Whining. Complaining. How about judging? How about condescending? How about self-righteous? Oh, those self-righteous people. I'd never be one of those. That's a statement of self-righteousness. Oh, those self-righteous people. That's like the guy who says, I'm not angry. Hello, let me give you a mirror. So there's two ways of living senselessly. What we have really is a picture of two prodigal sons. And remember last week we said, okay, I'm going to hold up the mirror of Jesus' story. Which one are you? The sad thing about self-righteousness and entitlement and judgment is that it often blinds us from reality. And then we find ourselves walking in senseless living. The youngest son, I think most of us love that story because we can all relate to this poor guy who loses his way and makes a gigantic mess out of his life, and he comes home and the father loves him and restores him. We all get that, don't we? That's a feel-good story. We love that. But that's only half of the story that Jesus tells about people who are, remember the reason at the beginning of the chapter why he started telling the story is because the religious people were complaining with who Jesus was hanging out with. So the second half of the story is the story of the older son who is every bit a prodigal as the younger son, just in a far more socially acceptable manner. I mean, because after all, I'm in church this morning. I didn't go to the bar last night. Julie wouldn't let me, but I think you get the picture. it's really easy to slide into self-righteous condescension towards other people, isn't it? But the Father remains the same. And this is amazing to me, the brilliance of this story. So you have two sons, and where are they living? At the same house. And who is their father? The same father. And one was rejoicing and having a party, and the other was miserable in self-torment of anger and jealousy and condescension and self-righteousness. And what was the difference between the two? Because the father was the same, the resources were the same, the house was the same, the feast was the same, everything was the same. What was the difference between the two boys? Because it was the difference between heaven and hell. The younger son was broken and humble, and in his brokenness, willing to accept and receive the Father's love and grace. He was grateful, overwhelmed with gratefulness in his brokenness. The other son, who thought he did everything right and had it all together, was absolutely miserable, living in hell of his own self-inflicted thoughts. Same father, same resources, same party, same house, same love. Do you think it's possible for us to torment ourselves with jealousy, envy, bitterness, judgment, self-righteousness? And you know, the thing that's so beautiful to me here is the father doesn't scold either of the boys. You wasted half my now you're going to get what you deserve. And what does he say when the older son is complaining and won't join the party? Verse 31, it's so beautiful. He says, "Child, you are always with me. Everything I have is yours." How does the father respond to the son of reckless spending and prodigal living? With mercy, grace, and love. How does he respond to the self-righteous son of judgment and condescension? With mercy, grace, and love. The choice was for each of the sons to surrender to the Father's love. And in their surrender or not, they experienced either heaven or hell by their own choosing. You know what's interesting is the word son is used over and over throughout this parable by Jesus. And the man had two sons, and he said to his son, and the younger son, and the old. But when Jesus says this, when the father turns to the complaining older son who did everything right, it's a different Greek word, and I wonder why the translators missed it. It's not son, which is an office or a position. He says child. Teknon in the Greek. In other words, you are thinking and seeing and behaving to reality like a child who needs to grow up. Child, you are always with me. and everything I have is yours. So imagine that you're invited to a dinner, and maybe some local politicians are going to be there, and I don't know the names of people around here with money and stuff, but I don't know. Some of them are going to be there, and it's a big to-do, and it's a big to-deal, and you're invited, and you're going to sit at for some reason at the head table with those people. How are you going to feel? Out of place, maybe nervous. Oh my God, I hope I don't say anything stupid. This guy's a professor, he wrote all these books. And then think about this. Finally, it's all over. You get in the car and you drive and you get home and you open the door and you say, it's so good to be home. Come home before you go home. Because each and every one of us is going home. And none of the shiny things that we think we can brag about none of those are going to last. The younger son, broken, humble. The older son, proud, angry, ungrateful. Come home before you go home. May God have mercy.